Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and today I want to talk about sleep and acute stress. So, there's kind of two different types of stress. There's chronic stress, which is stress that we experience for extended periods of time. So, something like caring for a sick family member, or parenting, or a stressful job could be chronic stress. But there's also acute stress. And acute stress are stressful events or situations that we find ourselves in that are maybe a little bit shorter, like they might be a one time thing or a couple of days or something like that. And the reason I'm bringing this up today, I don't know when you're watching this, but when I'm recording this right now, we're in the middle of a very stressful period from a community, country, continent, really a global perspective. There's a lot of unrest, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of hatred, there's a lot of division, there's a lot of differences. And it's kind of coming out in a bunch of different ways. And for me, when I experience things that are very acutely stressful, the first thing that I notice in my own life is my sleep gets difficult. And I just want to share with you a few things that I've learned over the last few years about what to do when this happens, what's normal, when you might want to maybe seek other resources, and a little bit about how to kind of guide yourself through these situations. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the emotions that are associated with this. When you have division, and this, I don't need to be talking about a very specific situation. This happens all the time in families, in communities, in groups of friends, in a country. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the situation is. But when you have that period, there's always a lot of emotion that comes with that. And typically the emotions are anger, sadness, frustration, annoyance, the list goes on. But one of the emotions that we often don't recognize as being a real player in this is fear. When we are in conflict with someone, there's often a lot of fear associated. And that fear might come from a few places. It might come from fear of impacting a relationship. It might come from fear of change. Humans do not like change. We like things, the status quo. We like to know what's going to happen. We like predictability. And when things shift, when things change, when something new happens, and I'm going to use COVID-19 as an example. It doesn't matter when you're watching this, this is going to be relevant. But COVID-19 is a really good example where we had to change. We had to change the way we worked. We had to change the way we went to school. We had to change the way that we saw people or didn't see people. We had to change a lot of things. And change like that is very triggering for people and brings up a lot of fear. And sometimes that fear manifests as anger. So when you see people who are really angry and full of hatred and just like really frustrated, I guess would be another word, you need to be aware that there's probably, not always, but probably a pretty significant fear component that's underlying that. And I want you to recognize this more for yourself. Because the thing with emotion is that we tend to just shut it down. When we feel angry, say, oh, I'm not supposed to feel that way. When we feel fear, you'd be like, what do you have to be scared of? When we feel frustration, annoyance, any of those, we tend to not want to experience them. And the reality is that we need to. We need to experience that fear, that anger, that sadness. We need to experience them. Those are all totally normal emotions. You're human, you're going to feel emotions, and blocking those emotions is going to keep you in that period of stress a lot longer. So recognize the fact of when you're feeling an emotion, try and identify it, and try really and identify if it's anger, is it anger or is it fear? Really try to identify what's the root and let yourself experience it. Now, if you find that you're having a difficult time working through it or experiencing it or kind of getting your body and or head around it, that is when you might want to reach out to somebody for support. So a counselor, a psychologist, psychotherapist, a social worker, anyone like that can really help you navigate getting through these emotions. Even a friend, a confidant, someone you can chat with about it can really help to kind of move you through those emotions, because I promise you every emotion that you experience is temporary. But the catch is that you have to experience them. So by blocking them off, by refusing to acknowledge them, it means that they're going to come back to haunt you in a different way. So working through those emotions is key. The second thing is in times of stress in outside of ourselves, so in a relationship or in a neighborhood or in a community or in a country or in a world, it can often feel like we aren't in control of anything. And from a global scale, that's actually very true. You cannot control what's happening across the world from you. You can't control what's happening in a different country than you are. But it's really important to keep an eye on and focus on what are the things that you can control. Okay, so some of the things that you can control are who you interact with, who you give your energy and your time to, the media that you're consuming, and how much you're going to let that stress kind of get you off your base and sideline your routine. You do have some control over that. So sleep is probably going to be impacted. You might be having stress cravings for all sorts of food. You probably don't feel like exercising because you're too tired and you're not eating so well. But you do have a little bit of control over whether or not you're going to sit on Twitter doom scrolling for 2 extra hours after bedtime, or you're going to still put it away and you're going to go to bed at your regular time. You do have control over whether or not you go out in the morning and get some light on your face. You do have control over whether you're going to eat foods that are going to help regulate your blood sugar or foods that are going to make you cranky and starving in an hour from now, right? So really focusing on the things that you can control is going to help significantly reduce the stress. Now, one of the things that I've been struggling with is finding a balance between my own mental health and staying informed, because it doesn't matter what's happening, if it's something that's happening in my community, in my country, in the world. I'm a person who likes to be informed. I like to know what's going on. I like to understand a little bit of the situation. But the problem with that is that social media has created a 24-hour news cycle where you can be constantly refreshing your Facebook feed or your Twitter feed or your Instagram to see what's new and what's the latest. And so there's a fine line between staying informed and losing the control over your routine, over what you're seeing, over the media you're consuming. And you have to figure out what that is for you. I have to figure out what that is for me. But I do believe it's important to stay informed. I think being informed about what other people are experiencing and going through is an important part of empathy and relating to people and understanding different perspectives. Without being informed, we can't do that. But you also need to take care of your own mental health and make sure that that's a priority as well. So, really finding that balance, and that may shift depending on whatever the situation is really important. Um, so, the third thing that I want to kind of touch on is just always, always, always when you have a period of acute stress that's impacting anything, your sleep primarily, always go back to the basics. So, make sure you're eating good food. Make sure that you're sticking with your sleep routine. You've got great sleep hygiene. Make sure that you're moving every day. Maybe it's not something super vigorous, like a crazy workout. It's something a little bit more relaxing, like a yin yoga or something more restorative, or walking. Remember, walking's always amazing. Make sure that you're doing your mindfulness activities. Make sure you're doing things that bring you joy. Make sure that you're spending time with the people that you love and who love you, and you're doing things that fulfill you. Don't forget to build yourself up, because I have good news and bad news. The bad news is that these conflicts that we're experiencing, that we're seeing in our families, in our communities, in our world, in our countries, in our world, they're not going to go away. These conflicts are going to be here. And I think they're going to get worse. And I don't mean to say that from a negative perspective. I mean that to be realistic, because there's always going to be things that we conflict on. And the way our society runs now, where we are a very global civilization, those fractures are going to be amplified with social media and the ways that people can communicate. The good news is that you have a lot of control over how these situations impact you. And you can start by focusing on that today. So focus on controlling the things in your life you can control, even if it's just your bedtime, even if it's just the food you're eating, even if it's just the exercise you're doing. Focus on those things that you can control. Be aware of and recognize and experience the emotions that you are feeling and experiencing. And also help your kids to kind of do that as well. We have a lot of anger and fear in our world right now. And by helping your kids recognize and name and experience their emotions, they're going to be so much more equipped as adults to do the exact same thing and to not get caught up on the fear and the anger and the division. So, really going through those emotions and experiencing those emotions are key. And focus on things that bring you joy and surrounding yourself with the people that you love, because there is a ton of good in this world and you have control over a lot of it, to be honest. Focus on the things that bring you joy, the relationships that, you get energy from, you get energized from. And I promise that we will get through any turmoil that we experience. That's how this works. Turmoil is a part of life, and you will come out the other side. So, have a great night's sleep. Let me know if this is helpful or if you need any sleep support in a situation like this, because this is exactly what I've developed my system for. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.